If someone asked me what the most painful thing from my childhood was, I wouldn't talk about skinned knees or the usual family arguments. What haunts me to this day, at 29 years old, is the indifferent look in my father's eyes every time I tried to share a small piece of the world I created. A handmade card, a scribbled drawing, a school award. That cold gaze made me feel invisible, as if my existence wasn't enough to make him proud. My name is Clara Mitchell, born and raised in a small town in central Ohio. Our house sat at the end of a street lined with maple trees, where autumn leaves blanketed the sidewalks and red and winter snow buried the white picket fence. From the outside, the Mitchell family looked like the perfect American dream. My father, Robert Mitchell, a successful businessman. My mother, Linda, gentle and reserved. My older brother, Jason, brilliant and charismatic with entrepreneurial dreams. And my younger brother, Ryan, the high school's star football player. And me, the daughter considered too quiet, too weird, too invisible. From a young age, I was different from them. I liked sitting alone in my room, doodling on paper or tinkering with simple coding I'd picked up from the town library, while Jason was often whisked away by Dad to meet business associates to learn how to be a leader, and Ryan was cheered on from the bleachers at every game. I only had Mom quietly slipping into my room, placing a cookie by my desk, and whispering, "You're special in your own way." But those whispers were never enough to fill the void left by my father's gaze. I still vividly remember a summer evening when I was 10. It was Father's Day, and I'd spent a week preparing a handmade card. I cut out blue construction paper, glued on glittering gold stars, and wrote a clumsy, childish poem. "Dad, you're the brightest star, guiding me far." My heart raced as I handed it to him after dinner. He glanced at it, gave a faint smile, folded it, and turned back to the football game on TV. Less than 5 minutes later, Ryan burst in, holding a cheap ceramic mug from the convenience store with number 1 Dad printed on it. Dad laughed loudly, pulled Ryan into a hug, and said, "That's my boy." I stood there, glitter still clinging to my hands, wondering, what about me? From that moment, I began to see the invisible divide in our family. Jason, the future leader. Ryan, the natural-born athlete. And me, the quiet, slightly odd girl. No one said it out loud, but Dad's actions carved it into my mind. At school, I excelled, always near the top of my class. The first time I got a perfect score on a math test, I rushed home, eager for Dad's praise. He just nodded and said, "Good, but don't forget to help Mom set the table." That same evening, Jason announced his idea for a snack-sharing app between friends. Without a single line of code, he got a pat on the back and praise as if he were the next Steve Jobs. Ryan didn't even need to try hard. One touchdown in a high school football game was enough for Dad to throw a backyard BBQ, inviting the whole neighborhood. I was there too, not as the star, but as the girl quietly stacking plates and cleaning up after the party. With each passing day, my role became clearer. The supporting act. I wondered how many other kids like me grew up in a house full of laughter but never felt they belonged. I smiled when everyone else did, but inside there was a cold silence. My mother, Linda, was probably the only one who saw it. She'd come into my room while I studied, wrap her arms around me, and whisper, "You're special in a way your father doesn't understand." But she was too gentle to challenge him. She kept the peace, kept the dinners warm, but her silence only deepened my sense of isolation. At 15, I was selected for a statewide honors program in computer science for top students. I could hardly believe it when I got the acceptance letter. For a week, I eagerly awaited family dinner to share the news. But as soon as I opened my mouth, Dad cut me off. "Hold on, Jason just had a pitch meeting with investors. Tell us about it, son." Jason's story dominated the meal, and my news was brushed aside like meaningless dust. That night, alone in my room, the acceptance letter on my desk felt like bitter proof that no matter what I achieved, to Dad, I was still the invisible child. Over time, I learned to bury my longing for his approval. I kept striving, but I stopped hoping his gaze would change. Instead, I kindled a different fire in my heart, not one seeking praise, but one determined to prove I could stand tall, even if overlooked. Maybe it was Dad's indifference that planted the seed of that resolve. The pain became fuel. The loneliness turned into strength. I stopped looking for his light and learned to create my own. But I'll never forget the feeling of being left out of the family picture, sidelined from the moments that mattered. I know favoritism in a home can leave scars that linger for a lifetime. And perhaps it was from those scars that I grew different, stronger, but cracked inside. Looking back on that childhood, I want to ask you, those listening to my story, have you ever felt like a shadow in your own family? Have you ever poured your heart into something, hoping for praise, only to be met with silence? If so, you're not alone. Share your story so we can prove that even when overlooked, we can still write our own worth. Some wounds don't bleed, but they sting with the lightest touch. For me, it's every time I tried my hardest for a word of praise from Dad, only to be crushed by his silence or a dismissive remark. As I grew older, I realized that indifference wasn't fleeting. It had become a habit, an unchanging pattern in the Mitchell household. I entered high school with a burning desire to prove myself. On the first day of ninth grade, I set a goal to make the honor roll, the list of the school's top students. I studied day and night, buried in books while outside my window. Jason chatted loudly with friends about his fast food sharing app idea, and Ryan practiced football under the stadium lights. When the grades were posted, my name topped the list. The school sent a congratulatory letter. I remember running home, heart pounding, clutching the certificate to show at dinner. Dad glanced at it, nodded, and said, "Good, keep it up." Then he turned to Ryan. "Big game this weekend, son. I'll invite some buddies to cheer you on." His words were like a bucket of ice water on my still warm joy. I forced a smile, hid the certificate under my hand, and lay awake that night wondering, what more do I have to do for him to be proud? In the years that followed, I poured everything into my studies. In 11th grade, I entered a statewide science research competition. I chose a topic on artificial intelligence, something many thought was too advanced for a high school girl. I spent weeks at the city library, borrowing technical books, learning to code, and staying up late to test models. On the day of the results, I cried when my name was announced as the first place winner. The shiny certificate in my hands wasn't just a personal victory, it was proof I was worthy of being seen. That evening, dinner went as usual. I waited until Dad took his first bite of steak before nervously speaking up. "Dad, today I just—" Before I could finish, he interrupted. "Hold on, Jason. Tell me about your investor meeting. How's the startup going?" The table revolved around my brother. Jason eagerly talked about raising capital, his vision of becoming a tech billionaire. Dad nodded, his eyes gleaming with faith and expectation. I sat there, the certificate still fresh with the smell of new paper in my bag, unnoticed. I forced a smile, telling myself my success still mattered, just not to Dad. That night, I quietly hung the certificate on my bedroom wall, next to other small awards from past competitions. The wall filled up, but my room felt like a box holding forgotten efforts. While I was buried in books, Ryan became the school's star. Every football game had Dad in the stands, wearing a jacket with Ryan's number, cheering until his voice gave out. I'd never seen him that passionate about anything I did. Once, when Ryan scored a game-winning touchdown, the family threw a backyard BBQ. Neighbors, friends, and relatives filled the yard. I was there too, but my role was carrying plates, grilling extra sausages, and cleaning up after the party. Amid the music and smell of barbecue, I heard Dad laugh, slap Ryan's shoulder, and say, "My boy's a star. This town will remember Ryan Mitchell." Watching them, my heart tightened. A silent question echoed in my mind. "What about my name, Dad? Do you remember it?" When I entered college, I chose computer science at Ohio State University. I threw myself into projects, earned a STEM scholarship, and landed an internship at a major tech company in Columbus, a dream opportunity for hundreds of students. I nervously called Dad to share the news, hoping for a shred of joy. He only said, "Good, don't quit halfway like you usually do." That casual remark pierced my heart. Like I usually do? I'd been relentless for years, never abandoning anything important. But in his eyes, I was still the kid who started and gave up. I went silent, hung up quickly so he wouldn't hear my voice shake. Those years taught me a brutal truth. Fairness didn't exist in our family. Jason and Ryan only needed an idea or a touchdown to be celebrated. No matter what I achieved, I got a nod at best. I was torn between craving Dad's approval and the growing realization it would never come. Part of me still longed to hear, "I'm proud of you, Clara." But another part was hardening, learning to stand tall without his gaze. I told myself, if I can't be Dad's pride, I'll be my own. Dear friend, if you've ever felt this, pouring your heart out for a loved one's glance, only to get silence, I understand you more than anyone. That wound runs deep and lingers, but it can also fuel you to rise stronger. And that was just the beginning. After years of being overlooked, I chose a different path. One where I no longer needed anyone to hand me my worth. I would write my own destiny. If you find this story compelling, comment Y to let me know you're with me. If not, be honest and comment N. I'll cherish both, because sometimes the truth needs to be spoken, no matter how painful. They say youth is the brightest time of life, but for me, my early 20s felt like stepping into a dark room with only a flickering candle I had to keep from going out. That candle was my belief that I could create something valuable for myself, not for my father's approval. After graduating from Ohio State with a degree in computer science, I didn't follow the usual path of get a job, climb the ladder, like my peers. I moved to Columbus, renting a tiny third-floor apartment in an old building. It had a single room doubling as a bedroom and living space, a kitchen the size of a closet, and a window overlooking a parking lot. But to me, it was the first place where every decision was mine. By day, I worked part-time as a tech assistant to pay rent. At night, I sat at a wobbly wooden table coding my startup idea. It stemmed from a simple question: how can small businesses manage customers and sell online as easily as the giants? I wanted to build a digital platform for small entrepreneurs, like my mom, who once wished for tools to help sell her homemade pastries at local fairs. Some nights, I typed until the screen blurred with tears, not from failure, but from exhaustion. Dinner was instant noodles or peanut butter on bread, but I felt warm knowing I was living for my own dream. I remember one night at 2 a.m., my computer crashed, wiping out all my data. I collapsed on the table, sobbing like a child. But minutes later, I wiped my tears, restarted the computer, and began again. I was used to no one patting my back, used to deafening silence. In that silence, I found the only thing left: willpower. A year later, I had enough data to finish a prototype. I took a risk and rented a small conference room in downtown Columbus for a launch event. I couldn't afford fancy speakers or a grand backdrop, just my old laptop, a projector, and self-printed brochures. I even borrowed folding chairs from friends. But when I stood on that small stage, looking at a handful of young investors and curious local shop owners, my heart raced, yet my voice was strangely steady. I spoke about small businesses overshadowed by big brands. I showed how my platform could help them manage inventory, track customers, and sell with a few clicks. When I finished, the room was silent for a few seconds. I thought I'd failed. Then an investor stood, shook my hand, and said, "This has potential. You did this alone?" I nodded, my throat tight. He smiled and handed me a small seed fund check, barely enough for a few months. But to me, it was the first light in the dark room of my childhood. That evening, I stepped out of the building as rain fell softly. I tilted my face to the sky, letting the rain mix with my tears. For the first time, I felt I truly existed, not as a shadow in my family, but as someone recognized by the world outside. Of course, I still went home for special occasions, and like a scripted play, Dad never changed. At one family dinner, I timidly shared that my platform had secured its first investment. I waited, hoping for a spark of encouragement, but he only raised an eyebrow. "Good, keep it up." Then he turned to Jason. "Son, I hear your startup's meeting big investors soon? Tell me about it." The table erupted in laughter as Jason rambled on. Ryan chimed in about a recent game, making Dad so excited he planned another BBQ. I sat there, quietly cutting my steak, the familiar feeling washing over me. I was outside their story. But unlike before, I didn't feel small anymore. I realized Dad's approval was a dream that would never come true, and I didn't need it. I looked at my hands, calloused from typing, and knew my worth lay in what I'd built. That night, I returned to my apartment, turned on the warm yellow lamp, and sat at my desk piled with papers. I watched code run on my screen, read emails from beta testers, and smiled. I was on the right path. No matter how many times Dad ignored me, the world out there had a place for me to shine. In that moment, I let go of the burden to be his pride. I chose to be my own. The fire that had simmered for so long became my strength. I call it fire in silence. If you want to hear more stories like mine and relate to the struggles I've faced, check out my previous videos on this channel. They say silence is the strongest weapon. I never believed it until I held that black envelope in my hand. It was small, fragile, but carried the power to shift the entire balance of my family. 2 years had passed since I last sat at the Mitchell family dinner table. In those years, I vanished from family dinners, BBQs, even Christmas. I poured everything into my startup, built with blood and tears. My new office sat on the top floor of a glass building in Columbus, overlooking the twinkling Scioto River. My team was small, just over 20 people, but we all shared a mission: empowering small businesses to survive and thrive in the digital age. The day I signed the contract to acquire the corporation where my father was a regional director, I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't feel the triumphant glee I'd imagined. Only a strange peace, as if the scales of injustice in my heart had finally balanced. This year, when a family group chat pinged, Father's Day dinner, 6 p.m., old house, confirm if coming, I didn't hesitate. I typed, "I'll be there." The chat went quiet for minutes before exploding with emojis, a question mark from Jason, a faint smile from Ryan, and a short message from Mom. "Can't wait to see you." I knew my return would shake things up, but it was time. That afternoon, I wore a fitted navy dress and a white blazer. Nothing flashy, but every detail exuded the confidence I'd built. I drove a sleek black car, its engine purring softly, and parked in front of the old house. Neighbors' eyes flicked toward me, probably surprised to see the rarely mentioned daughter step out of that car. I took a deep breath, clutched the black envelope, and walked in. Laughter filled the living room. Jason was talking about a potential investment deal I knew had flopped. Ryan bragged about becoming a temporary coach after an injury. Dad sat in the center, beer in hand, beaming like a king between two princes. When I entered, all eyes turned to me. Jason raised an eyebrow, Ryan smirked, and Dad gave a slight nod. "Well, look who finally showed up." I smiled, greeted everyone, and took the empty seat at the table's end. The mood quickly reverted as if I were just a stray guest. Dinner began. Grilled meat, mashed potatoes, the smell of sauce in the air. I ate slowly, listening to Dad praise my brothers, Jason's leadership qualities, Ryan's potential despite injury. Then he raised his glass, head high. "I'm proud of all my kids, except the failure." Laughter erupted from Jason and Ryan. No one noticed my eyes freeze, my hand tightening under the table. But unlike before, my heart didn't shatter. I felt a cold calm, as if his words were the final drop in an already full lake. I set my spoon down and stood. My voice was steady. "I have a Father's Day gift, too." The table went silent. Dad squinted, smirking. "What now? Another handmade card?" Without answering, I pulled out the black envelope and placed it before him. "You should take a look." He scoffed, tearing it open with disdain. But seconds later, his smile froze. His eyes darted over the text, his hand trembling, beer spilling onto the tablecloth unnoticed. "What is this?" His voice was hoarse. I looked straight at him, unwavering. "Remember the corporation you've worked for the past 10 years? Last week, my company acquired it. As of today, I control it." The room erupted. Whispers, chairs scraping, gasps. Jason flushed red, Ryan's jaw dropped. Mom covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. Dad stammered, "No, it's impossible." I tilted my head, smiling. "Believe it or not, Dad, but I'm not the failure in your story anymore." I turned and walked out. Behind me, chaos erupted. Jason's rapid questions, Ryan's frustration, Dad shouting my name, but I didn't look back. The door closed, and the sound of my car's engine faded as I left the familiar house I once thought I'd never belong to. They say the brightest light can flicker out. I never realized how true that was until I saw my brothers, once Dad's shining stars, fall from their radiant skies. It started months after that fateful Father's Day dinner. Word spread fast in Columbus's startup scene. Jason's company went bankrupt, drowning in debt, investors turning away. Once a confident guy in sharp suits, he was now gaunt, unshaven, eyes sunken from sleepless nights. At the same time, Ryan suffered a severe knee injury during practice. His dream of going pro ended with one fall. The once vibrant kid now sat in a dark room, avoiding friends, refusing to leave the house. Dad, who'd built his pride on them, was lost. He stopped showing up at games, stopped boasting about promising startups. At dinners, his eyes were distant, as if the two pillars he leaned on had crumbled. I watched from afar. Part of me wanted to coldly think they were paying for their arrogance and favoritism. But another part, the part that longed for a whole family, ached with pity. I knew what it was to feel like a failure, to be swallowed by darkness. I'd been there, and I didn't want anyone, even those favored over me, to stay in that abyss. One afternoon, I got a surprising text from Jason. "Clara, you free? I need to talk." I agreed. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. When I walked in, Jason was slumped at a corner table, his coffee cold. Gone was the radiant brother. In his place was a man weighed down by debt and aimlessness. "Clara," his voice was hoarse, "I've lost everything." I stayed silent. Jason had never said the word lost in his life. He always believed he'd win. But now, his arrogance was gone, replaced by despair. Before I could respond, the door opened. Ryan hobbled in, crutches clacking on the floor. He sat, avoiding my gaze. I heard his heavy, tired breaths. "You know, Clara," Ryan said softly, "I thought I had a bright future. Now, it's all gone." Looking at my brothers, I saw a reflection of myself years ago. Ambition, pride, then devastation when Dad's light no longer shone on them. We sat in silence for a long time. The clink of spoons, the whir of the coffee grinder, the laughter from other tables made our quiet heavier. Finally I spoke, "What do you want from me today?" Jason looked up, eyes red. "I need a chance. A place to stand. I know you've made it. Your company. Can I start over there?" Ryan met my gaze, his eyes dim. "Me too. I can't go back to the field, but I don't want to live like this forever. I want to do something, to feel useful." My heart tightened. This was the moment I'd imagined, when they'd beg for help. But now that it was real, I felt no joy, no satisfaction, just a quiet sadness, because we were all kids who'd craved Dad's recognition. I took a deep breath, set my coffee down. "All right, but hear this clearly." They looked up, expectant. I said, each word deliberate. "Not because we're siblings will I give you a chance. I'll never hand out charity. You'll have to prove your worth, like I did when no one believed in me." Silence. Then Jason nodded, shoulders trembling. "I get it. I'll do whatever it takes to start over." Ryan sighed, but a spark flickered in his eyes. "If you believe I can stand again, I'll try." I smiled, relieved. Though a long road lay ahead, they were finally looking at themselves instead of living in the false glow Dad had built. Days later, I arranged for Jason to join our new project development team, where his communication and negotiation skills could reach clients. For Ryan, I placed him in our youth training program, where he could share his experience and spirit with kids seeking motivation. I didn't expect instant success, but I hoped they'd learn the lesson I paid dearly for. True worth doesn't come from Dad's admiring gaze, but from relentless effort and self-proof. Leaving the coffee shop, I glanced back at my brothers, still sitting with their cold coffees. I knew this was just the start of a new journey, one of growth through pain. And I knew Dad wasn't ready for the truth that the family's balance had shifted entirely. He still lived in a past where Jason and Ryan were his pride, and I was the failure. But the day would come when he'd have to face it. Have you ever watched a shining light go out before your eyes and seen the proud learn to rise from ashes? It's a scene both sad and necessary, because only when the old light fades can we find the true fire within. They say time heals all wounds. I didn't fully believe it until I saw my own family slowly change, shedding their false glow to live authentically. A year passed since I handed Dad that black envelope. It was a challenging year, but one that proved anyone, even those who've fallen, can be reborn. Jason was the first proof. When he joined my company empty-handed, I saw the unease in his eyes. A man used to dazzling on a stage now sitting through hours of customer complaints over tiny details. At first he stumbled, carrying an ego bigger than the boardroom, but a client's blunt words, "I need a listener, not a showman," hit him hard. That night, Jason stayed late at the office, staring blankly. I didn't interfere. I wanted him to face the truth. Worth isn't in talking loud, but in patience and understanding. Slowly, he learned to listen. He spent hours noting every request, patiently following up on small details. Then, something miraculous happened. Clients who'd turned away came back because Jason's the only one who truly cares. I saw a new light in my brother's eyes, not the fleeting glow of chasing fame, but the warm light of humility and responsibility. Ryan's journey was tougher. Going from a promising athlete to hobbling on crutches was a blow that could kill any dream. At first, he was shrouded in gloom. But joining our youth training program sparked something. He started teaching kids warm-ups and teamwork, initially reluctant, eyes averted. Then a boy in the group said, "Coach Ryan, I want to be strong like you." Those words lit a fire. Ryan looked up, eyes misty. From that day, he poured his heart into inspiring those kids. I once caught Ryan alone in an empty gym, leaning on his crutches, watching the kids run on the field. His eyes held no envy, only quiet pride. He'd turned his pain into strength for the next generation. Then came the big day. My company held its third anniversary celebration. The auditorium was packed, lights blazing, hundreds of guests from across the region. I stood backstage, heart pounding as the MC announced, "Please welcome the three who've transformed this company, Clara, Jason, and Ryan Mitchell." The applause was deafening. I stepped onto the stage, my brothers beside me. Jason in a simple suit, calm and composed. Ryan in a polo, still limping slightly, but his smile radiant. We stood together, no one a shadow of the other for the first time. In the audience, I saw Dad. He sat there, hands clenched, eyes fixed on us. When our gazes met, I saw something had changed. No more coldness, no more disdain, just raw emotion. After my speech, I walked to the front row. Dad stood, approaching me. His trembling hand rested on my shoulder. His voice broke. "Clara, I'm proud of all of you." I froze. For nearly 30 years, I'd dreamed of those words, thinking they'd never come. Now, hearing them, I felt no anger or triumph, just relief. His tears fell, blending with the applause around us. In that moment, the shadow of favoritism that had loomed for years seemed to dissolve. That evening, our family sat together for the first time in years. No boasting, no bitter comparisons, just quiet, honest sharing. Jason said he was grateful for a second chance. Ryan said he'd found new meaning in life. I said success doesn't come from revenge, but from forgiveness. Dad sat silently listening. Then he nodded. "I was wrong. Thank you for not closing this door forever." A year earlier, I'd left that house amid chaos, leaving behind Dad's anger and my brother's mockery. A year later, we sat together, raising glasses, smiling. No one mentioned the black envelope or the old harsh words. We all understood what mattered. We'd found each other again. Perhaps the greatest lesson I learned wasn't in contracts or fancy cars, but in the transformation of each heart. I once thought proving myself and taking revenge on Dad would set me free. But true freedom came from forgiveness. When I gave Jason and Ryan a chance to start over, I learned family doesn't need to be perfect, just patient enough to see each other anew. My story doesn't end with personal victory, but with a family reborn from brokenness. I believe anyone, even the forgotten, can rewrite their worth. Lasting success doesn't come from rivalry, but from relentless effort and shared love. If my journey resonates with you, leave a comment below. A simple why is enough to show you're with me. And don't forget to follow the channel for more raw, powerful stories like this.